Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, a search for the best way to fight wildfires.
I just think we haven't pushed the boundaries of technology and innovation in the fire suppression and extinguishing space. We just haven't.
Governor Gavin Newsom announces a new competition that could change firefighting in California. And new air quality monitors are being deployed to find out which parts of San Diego need the most help.
Everybody looks at me in the street and they don't believe me. I don't have a place to live, but I've been so blessed.
Those experiencing homelessness say it's a difference maker. How the city is planning to open a second storage facility.
It's kind of like exercise for attention. You are training your attention skills. So just as you might diet and exercise to get healthier, I'd see it the same way with any of the medication that people might take. You could do both. You could choose to just go one way or the other.
And treating ADHD without the use of medication. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening. It's Friday, May 10th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. After some of the deadliest, most destructive fires in state history, state leaders are looking for better ways to respond. Governor Gavin Newsom was in San Diego today calling for ideas. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman was there.
We lost 139 lives to 16,600 wildfires. We lost over 32,000 structures in this state.
Governor Newsom says the last 2 years have produced devastating wildfires in California.
It's like, what the hell are we going to do? And we're just a few weeks away from entering yet another fire season.
Newsom is pushing the idea for an X Prize competition that has the private sector competing for the best way to put out fires.
The concept is a fire detection and extinction X Prize. Can we find it and put it out before it grows? How it gets put out, is it drones, is it water cannons, who knows?
Newsom says climate change has made recent fires especially dangerous.
Some people may disagree, think global warming's a hoax and climate change is made up and it's some liberal fantasy and some conspiracy, but something ain't right as it relates to these wildfires. And it's not just poor management. With all due respect, a lot of these fires are not wildfires. Ask the folks up in Malibu, there's not huge forests there. A lot of these are vegetation fires because the hots are getting a lot hotter and the dries are getting a lot drier.
Newsom says one of the benefits of an X Prize competition is there are no public dollars at stake, as all the money for the competition comes from private donors. Newsom says the state may adopt the winning team's fire suppression strategy.
I just think we haven't pushed the boundaries of technology and innovation in the fire suppression and extinguishing space. We just haven't.
The competition hopes to kick off later this year. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
Cleanup is on hold for some areas burned by the Camp Fire. According to the Sacramento Bee, the delays are due to concerns over endangered frog species. Environmental reviews are needed to rebuild hundreds of homes destroyed last year in the town of Paradise. The state needs the okay from federal regulators before crews can resume their cleanup efforts. Here in San Diego, air pollution is the target of a new device rolling around our streets. KPBS environment reporter Eric Anderson shows us how it works and who's paying for it.
San Diego County officials hope to have a much better picture of the region's air pollution problem soon. That's because the California Air Resources Board is paying for 15 new movable air pollution monitors that can help pinpoint problems. San Diego County Supervisor Nathan Fletcher says all of the county's residents deserve clean air.
If we can monitor it, we can better address it. But the monitoring alone will not improve the air quality. It's the data we get from monitoring that will hold us accountable for actions we take to actually improve the air quality.
Fletcher says disadvantaged communities suffer the most. He says a child born in Barrio Logan is 8 times more likely to develop asthma than a child born in La Jolla. The Air Pollution Control District's Robert Card says 2 mobile monitors are also driving local roads for a month.
They're driving every road 20 times within this area, 12 census tracts, and giving us a picture of pollution for particulate matter and different gases. And so with that, we'll look at their data on a 3D visual graph and we'll be able to say we need to pinpoint something here. Let's go put our permanent samplers here.
Tracking the pollution on the county's roads like Interstate 5 here in Barrio Logan is just the first step. It's what they do with the information that they find that will help them address air pollution. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
The CDC reports a rise in measles cases across the country, and now Washington is making it harder to get vaccine exemptions. Today, the state's governor signed a bill ending exemptions for personal or philosophical reasons. The law only applies to the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine. Some parents who oppose the new law protested outside of the bill signing.
We believe in our doctors. We believe in our nurses. We believe in our educators. We believe in science, and we love our children, and that is why in Washington State we are against measles.
We're not here to take away anybody else's rights, whether they choose to vaccinate or not. We just are asking for that same right to decide for our own children what's best for their health and for their safety.
California is also looking at ways to regulate vaccine exemptions. One bill would give state health officials the authority to approve a request instead of doctors. A San Diego company has developed video games to help children focus. Brain Leap Technologies attention training games were developed at UC San Diego. Earlier, I spoke to the company's CEO about their effectiveness. San Diego-based Brain Leap has developed video games to help, and I'm joined now by the company's CEO, Jeff Coleman. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So, Jeff, tell me more about Attention Arcade.
So Attention Arcade is actually a combination of 6 different games. Each of the different games trains different aspects of attention. So attention is actually a fairly broad construct. It's not just one thing. Eye movements are an important part of attention. Inhibitory control, not getting distracted by things, is an important part of attention. So each of the games trains from different angles so that you can improve the broader idea of attention.
Can you put in perspective for us, what's the connection between autism and a game that helps a child focus and have attention?
Sure. So the games were originally designed specifically with autism in mind because children with autism and adults tend to have poor eye movements, inaccurate. They're slower to orient to a target. They're less accurate when they're doing that. They're going to miss the target. So that was the genesis of the games. And then what we found was that it improved some of the broader aspects of attention as well. So things like executive function, the skills underlying executive function, we were hearing that back from parents who had children go through the study, that their executive function improved, that they were able to focus more in school, to maybe work on their math problems for longer periods of time. That's when we realized it had broader applications than just what it was initially designed for.
And speaking of the parents and the results, these games are actually the effectiveness has been supported by science. Can you talk about the results of the UC San Diego study?
Sure. So these were, the original set of games were created at UC San Diego, and they did a small pilot clinical trial. There were 22 individuals who went through the trial between 9 and 25 years old. And that was, we know it benefits younger kids, but at the time the eye tracking technology was pretty limited. So they had to go with older kids going through the study in young adults. And what we saw was on attention orienting, so the accuracy of moving and focusing on a particular target, there was a 68% improvement. Inhibiting distraction, there was a 55% improvement, so being able to stay focused when something would distract you. And for those kids who had ADHD symptoms as well, there was a 30% improvement in their focus.
So what do you think is happening, or what do researchers think is happening? Is it just that the kids are just stimulated by the excitement of the game, that they want to pay attention? Why does it work?
No, because a lot of other companies have tried to do things like that. You actually play the games using your eyes. So an eye tracker is following where you're looking on the screen, and that's how you control where the spaceship is going or where the butterfly bob is flying. And where you look and where you plan to look is actually where you're putting your attention. Your eye movements and your attention system are closely tied. Directly training the attention system is actually something people haven't figured out. The closest we can get is training the eye movement system. And so that was the idea behind these games, that if we improve the eye movements, we're improving the attention, and that's what came out in the study.
And I noticed that you still paid close attention to the technology behind the video games. They seem like any other video game as far as the graphics, and how important was that to make sure that it was something that was going to be exciting and stimulating for kids?
That actually was part of the design. That in the research study, that was not so important to them. We've actually updated some of the games to make them more fun to play while still including the important components of the attention training in them. But the kids do like them.
And what's your goal with the games?
It is to help as many kids as possible with attention challenges. It's a big problem in schools. We are spending a lot of our energy in trying to get into schools because we can reach a broader population there. We do have a home version as well, because some people aren't going to have access to it in schools. So we just want to help as many kids as we possibly can who need it.
And I understand you are not a doctor, but would you imagine that these games would be in lieu of medicine or in addition to, or? And
I'm not a doctor at all, but what most of the ADHD drugs do is increase an individual's capacity for attention. It doesn't actually train them to use those skills and to focus. So it does help people for sure. We see ours as a kind of a completely different way of approaching it. It's kind of like exercise for attention. You are training your attention skills. So just as you might diet and exercise to get healthier, I would see it the same way with any of the medication that people might take. You could do both. You could choose to just go one way or the other.
Jeff, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, negotiations with China end without a deal as the U.S. places higher tariffs on most Chinese goods. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Part of San Diego's strategy to help the homeless is to open storage facilities. KPBS reporter Priya Sridhar says the city is looking at a new location in City Heights.
At the corner of Commercial Street and 20th in Sherman Heights, for the past year, what was an empty warehouse is now being used as a storage facility for homeless people to keep their belongings. Linda Gentelli, who has been homeless on and off for 8 years, says having a place to put her clothes has given her confidence that she might be able to get back on her feet.
You know why I was so happy? Because I could come and dump my dirty clothes, pick up a clean clothes, and look nice for an interview for a job, and everybody looks at me in the street and they don't believe me. I don't have a place to live. But I've been so blessed with God.
In March, the City Council voted to keep the 500-bin facility open through June 2020, despite some strong opposition from neighbors of the site like Erica Bosian Garcia. She says the facility has drawn more unsheltered people into the neighborhood.
So you've got residential homes right here in this neighborhood. You have Sherman Elementary, which is 2 to 4 blocks away, where you have 5-year-olds going to school in the morning and walking home after school. That's not who you want your kids bumping into on their walk to school or walk home from school.
The city says this facility is at capacity and they need to open a new one. They plan to do that in City Heights.
We know there's a need. We know this helps people to protect their belongings, get their belongings off the streets. So we wanted to open another storage facility where there is a need, where there's a homeless population that we know. The council president stepped forward and said, do it in my district, we'll work with you.
Block says while they've identified a location, they plan to do community outreach in City Heights in the next 2 months before they announce it. Priya Sridhar, KPBS News.
Today, U.S. trade talks with China ended without a deal. In fact, the U.S. has increased tariffs on $200 billion worth of goods from China, from 10% to 25%. What will this mean for the U.S. consumer? Here to talk about it for our Friday Business Report is Miro Kopik with SDSU and Bottom Line Marketing. Welcome.
Hi, Ebony.
Hi there. So how will American consumers feel the impact of these tariffs?
They'll feel the impact on everything they buy. For example, families are expected to see, if you're buying just clothes for your family, up to $500 increase in the cost of those clothes. There was a study done by the Federal Reserve and the University of Chicago that showed that recently the tariffs on washing machines also increased the cost of the dryer, since washers and dryers are sold together, and those increased 25%. So each machine the cost increased $100 a piece. So if you're buying a new washer and dryer, that's $200 extra that are coming out of your pocket due to the tariffs.
So if we're paying more, why is the U.S. doing this? What's the goal?
Well, the U.S. trade policy currently is basically twofold. One is to bring back jobs to the United States, and that's been the goal of every administration. The other thing is rectifying what they perceive as unbalanced trade. And most of it in the case of China is related to access to the Chinese market. The U.S. manufacturers and service companies don't have the same kind of access that the Chinese manufacturers have in the United States. And the second part is intellectual property. The tariffs are an interesting threat, but what they do is most manufacturers, the government does have some fees that they receive from the tariffs, but at the end of the day, the manufacturer may absorb some of the tariffs, but they don't want to ruin their margin, and so it's all going to get passed on to consumers, and that's one of the biggest issues in this whole trade war.
So moving on, this week we saw as Uber and Lyft drivers actually protested outside of the San Diego airport and across the nation. Drivers are saying they're not being paid enough. This as Uber was preparing to go public. Uber went public today. What did we find out? What did we learn?
Uber stock price dropped. Today it opened at 45. It ended up at 41.37. What we found is that, it's really driven by investors. At the end of the day, these drivers, the Uber model says that without being contract drivers, as opposed to employees, their model won't work. They drove $11 billion in revenues last year, and they lost $3 billion. They're not even seeing profits in 2019. So investors are looking to a lot of things that Uber is doing, like scooters, electric bikes, autonomous vehicles, as really the growth engine of the future.
So is the company really worth $86 billion?
At the very least today, it's worth $85, $86 billion. What's going to be interesting is in 6 months, when all the venture capital firms and the private equity firms and the insiders start to sell the stock, what's going to happen? We know that when Lyft went public at the end of March, they went public. Actually, they did really well their first day. They went from $75 to over $80, but today they closed at $52, having lost a third of their value. So investors are a little bit skeptical on ride sharing because at the end of the day, they're not sure where the next set of profits are going to come from.
And lastly, here in California, there is an assembly bill that would be in a form of rent control. It would limit how much landlords could increase the rent from year to year. These types of bills usually are not very popular with developers. What are the pros and cons of something like this?
Well, I think the goal of the bill, 1482, is to keep housing costs reasonable in California. And so it's not really, they don't call it a rent control bill because that sets a specific price, but it's a rent cap bill. Developers don't like it because the minute you codify this, they're concerned. So it allows a owner to increase rent 5% plus the rate of inflation. So it can go up to 10%. So you have flexibility. But the problem is the real estate market doesn't think that once you actually put the bill in place, that next year people can go back and reduce the rent increase from 5 to 4%. That's the real risk. And there's a lot of benefits on the other side as well.
So we'll be watching this bill very closely. That wraps it up for our Friday Business Report. Mira Kopik, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Ebony.
Meth addiction remains a chronic problem in San Diego. Local researchers are working on a cure for the deadly Ebola virus in Africa and a new political direction for the County Board of Supervisors. Join us for the KPBS Roundtable tonight at 8:30.
Rainy weather will last through tomorrow. Dajia Swad has tonight's forecast.
We continue to see better chances for wet conditions across Southern California as we track out our low pressure system that is going to be moving quite slowly through this weekend. Now, here's a look at the satellite and radar from earlier today, and showers and even some heavier storms were mainly north of San Diego. We'll continue to see the likelihood for that in our area tonight. Scattered showers across San Diego County. We're dropping down to 61 in San Diego tonight. If you're out towards Oceanside, a low 55. Feeling cooler in towards Borrego Springs with a low 63 and 44 in Mount Laguna. And that wet weather is not just for the coast, nor are those low clouds. We're seeing that extend from the coast, inland areas, out towards the higher grounds as well. We'll continue to see this wet weather for tomorrow, showing you your timeline here via your Futurecast. Friday at 8 p.m. is what you're looking at currently. So tonight, some spotty activity. Starting off at 8 p.m. Cloudy conditions is what you're noticing mostly. And then as we head into the midnight hour, past that, we get this resurgence of moisture. 6 a.m. out towards Mount Laguna, Borrego Springs, continuing to press its way out toward the coast around 10 a.m. And then as we head into the early evening, still going to be looking at some shower activity and the chance for some thunderstorms in the higher ground. But by Saturday, 8 p.m., we're really noticing some improvements across the region. So once again, tomorrow, wet conditions for San Diego, not only at the coast, but into the deserts and mountain areas and mountains where we're going to have the best chance for some wet weather in terms of some thunderstorm potential, I should say. Topping off at 55 in Mount Laguna, 83 in Borrego Springs for Saturday, and 71 in Oceanside, lower 70s as well for San Diego. Making our move into Mother's Day, we dry out. Our moisture begins to shift further towards the east, impacting the Four Corners and portions of Texas. At home, we're not worried about that. We're saying goodbye to the wet weather and the low clouds, getting some sun for the early week, and temperatures rise. We noticed that temperature rise in inland areas. You're into the 80s by Tuesday with partly sunny skies. Mother's Day into the deserts, upper 80s, and then into the 90s Monday and Tuesday with lots of sunshine. Mountains, you're looking at that wet weather and a thunderstorm for tomorrow. Breezy conditions Sunday as that upper level low continues to press its way to the east. A cool feel Monday, and then it's the upper 70s by Tuesday with lots of sun. Reporting for KPBS News, I'm your meteorologist, Dajia Swad. Back to you.
Starting tonight, the Kin Cinema is showcasing a week of film classics. KPBS cinema junkie Beth Accomando has this preview.
Ken Cinema kicks off a new week of film classics with Bob Fosse's Oscar-winning Cabaret. Over the weekend, there will be matinees of Charlie Chaplin's City Lights. Although sound pictures debuted in 1927, Chaplin dismissed them as a fad and insisted on making his 1931 film City Lights as a silent movie. Talking pictures were no fad, but Chaplin was correct in deciding that his Little Tramp was ideally suited to silent cinema. But perhaps what lingers longer than the laughs is the sweet sentiment of the film. It's a perfect swan song to the silent era and to its most cherished clown. Jump ahead about 3 decades and you can revel in the very verbal, but also very visual humor of Billy Wilder, Jack Lemmon, Tony Curtis, and the delicious Marilyn Monroe in Some Like It Hot. The film playfully shreds sexual stereotypes and delivers one of the most memorable final lines of any movie ever.
But you don't understand, Osgood. I'm a man. Well, nobody's perfect.
But perfection is evident on screen with Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo. Last year, Vertigo ousted Orson Welles' Citizen Kane from its #1 slot in Sight and Sound's prestigious poll of the top 50 films of all time. The film is hypnotic, perverse, and absolutely riveting. Next up, Jean-Luc Godard's Contempt adds foreign flavor to this collection of film classics.
Avec Brigitte Bardot et Michel Piccoli.
Saving the best for last is Sam Peckinpah's The Wild Bunch. Peckinpah's tale about aging outlaws attempting one last score was like a brutal Valentine to not only the fading of the Old West and all it stood for, but also the passing of the traditional Hollywood Western and all its tropes.
You want to come along? It ain't like it used to be, but it'll do.
This is a great way to wrap up a week of film classics. All these films deserve the expanse of the big screen and the joy of watching them as a communal experience. Beth Accomando, KPBS News.
Here's a recap of tonight's top stories. Governor Gavin Newsom says he's launching an X Prize for firefighting. The governor made the announcement today in La Jolla. Private donations will fund a contest of ideas for the best way to respond to wildfires. Newsom says the state may adopt the winning team's strategy. New air pollution monitors are rolling out across San Diego County. The portable devices will collect data over a 1-month period. County leaders say the information will help them identify trouble spots and come up with better solutions to improve air quality. The city of San Diego will open a second location for homeless people to store their belongings. It will be similar to a facility that recently opened in Sherman Heights, but has already reached capacity. The city plans to work on community outreach in City Heights before announcing an exact location. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. And tonight we end with music from Live at the Belly Up. It airs tonight at 11 on KPBS. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.
Just got to town in my long black Cadillac. Just got to town in my long black Cadillac. I do the Fleetwood boogie, baby, get my